You were never meant to hear this name. Greymark. Even saying it aloud feels like trespassing on a graveyard where the stones still bleed. For centuries, the Greymark dynasty has existed as a whisper at the edges of history, absent from textbooks, erased from archives, yet curiously entangled with every major upheaval of the last 300 years. The dynasty's fingerprints show up where bloodlines are tampered with, where wars are provoked from shadows, where institutions are hollowed out and refilled with something colder, older, and hungrier than human ambition. Tonight, you will step into a world you were trained never to question. A world where ancient corruption moves like a silent current under everything you believe to be real. What if I told you that nations fall not by accident, but by design? That certain names reappear across continents, woven into power structures like invisible sutures holding the wound of history open. The Greymarks perfected this. They learned how to hide in plain sight, how to build a dynasty not of castles and crowns, but of invisible influence. Bloodlines seeded into governments, churches, and secret orders. And while you were distracted by the noise of politics and spectacle, their agenda has been unfolding like a ritual hidden in daylight. They call it continuity, but the initiated know it by its real name, the corruption of lineage. I am not here to entertain you. I am here to wake you. This is not a documentary. It's a descent. Every word from this point forward will strip away another layer of the lie you've been living. If you keep listening, you will not come back the same. You may feel it already. The tightening in your chest, the electric chill at the back of your skull. That is not fear. That is recognition. Some part of you has always known there was something rotten at the root. Tonight we name it. Are you ready to learn the secret history of the Greymark dynasty? Good, because after this, you won't be able to unsee it. The public story begins in 1712, in a windswept corner of the North Atlantic, on an island so small it's missing from most maps. Officially, it was a quarantine outpost for undesirable immigrants. Unofficially, it was a laboratory of bloodlines. There, among candlelit catacombs beneath a decaying chapel, the first Greymark patriarch orchestrated what would later be called the selection. It wasn't merely intermarriage between aristocratic houses. It was the merging of certain traits, both physical and psychological, across generations. Records indicate they purchased children from destitute families, rebranded them with new surnames, and infused their bloodlines with a hybrid of old European occult families and fresh colonial stock. This was not marriage. It was engineering. From that hidden island, a network of schools appeared. Officially seminaries. In reality, indoctrination crucibles. Young men of promising temperament were brought in under religious pretexts and subjected to rituals disguised as education. By the time they emerged into the world, as lawyers, priests, judges, generals, they no longer belonged to themselves. They belonged to the Greymark vision, an empire without borders, powered by secrecy, driven by continuity, protected by silence. Even presidents, prime ministers, and bishops carried their altered signatures. This is why you've never heard of them. It's not that the dynasty is small. It's that their operations are vast enough to dissolve into the air you breathe. Think about it. How many coincidental revolutions, assassinations, and scandals have happened with no clear culprit? How many world-shaping decisions are signed behind closed doors by men you've never seen before? Men whose ancestors attended the academy and took oaths they've never broken. This is how a dynasty hides, not by being absent, but by being everywhere at once. You were told history is a series of accidents. But what if it's a series of initiations? Each war, each collapse, each new leader rising like a phoenix from ashes. The ashes the Greymarks themselves created. That's why we begin here on that wind-blasted island. Because it was never about wealth or land. It was about seed and mind. They were planning something, and now, after 3 centuries, it has bloomed. If your pulse has quickened, good. That means your instincts are waking up. We're only at the threshold. Step deeper and you'll see how far their shadow stretches into your life right now. By now you've realized this is not about one family sitting in candle-lit rooms plotting wars. That's the illusion. The Greymark's true innovation wasn't control of governments, it was control of minds. They understood something most kings and conquerors never did, that power over men is fragile unless it seeps into the unseen places of their psyche. And so, what began on that wind-blasted island evolved into something far darker. Rituals designed to rewrite identity itself. They called them observances. On the surface, a kind of advanced catechism, prayer, discipline, silence. But embedded within those observances were patterns designed to fracture the boy and rebuild the man. Sensory deprivation followed by sensory overload. Shame followed by exaltation. Exposure to forbidden texts, then forced recantation. Each act stripped away one more layer of who he thought he was. By the end, the initiate was no longer simply a person. He was a vessel. His own memories no longer felt like his, but like echoes of a larger will. This is the foundation of their power. Psychological control hidden inside religious devotion. Secrecy hidden inside tradition. It's why they targeted young men, future architects of society. A single generation of engineered leaders could steer entire nations without ever revealing the hand behind the steering wheel. When one of their initiates became a general, a banker, a scientist, he didn't have to take orders. He was the order. Think about the institutions you've trusted. Churches, universities, charities. Think about how rituals, uniforms, symbols, and phrases shape behavior, even when you don't believe in them. Now imagine those tools honed to a blade. Imagine an institution whose sole purpose is to cut you from yourself and graft you into a lineage. That is the Greymark model. That is the template being replicated quietly, invisibly, in places you'd never suspect. You may feel unsettled right now, as if your own past is shifting under your feet. That's normal. You're starting to see how these patterns show up in your own life, how you've been trained to respond, to obey, to conform without question. This is the first crack in the mirror. Through it, you can glimpse the machinery they've hidden in plain sight. But we're only just beginning. The next layer reveals how they embedded their code into entire populations at once. The Greymarks understood a brutal truth. Controlling one man is fleeting, but controlling a myth is forever. So they shifted their focus from training individuals in secret to training entire populations in plain sight. Religion, politics, entertainment, these weren't separate arenas. They were channels for programming. By seeding their rituals into mass culture, they could replicate the same psychological rewiring on millions at once without ever being named. It started with symbols. A crest here, an architectural motif there, a certain phrase whispered by a president at a funeral, a hymn sung in a school that no one remembered writing, small details too trivial to notice until you realize they're everywhere. Each symbol a key, each phrase a trigger. The uninitiated saw tradition. The initiated saw instructions. The Greymarks had created a language hidden inside public life, an operating system of power that only they could read and update. Then came the institutions. Universities founded with charitable names but built on Greymark land. Seminaries producing pastors whose sermons carried subtle reframings of scripture. Banks funding wars that just happened to create new democracies designed on the same template. When populations resisted, crises appeared. Financial collapses, pandemics, sudden wars, all accidents that just happened to weaken old identities and make the public ripe for a new narrative. What you think of as history's chaos is in fact history's choreography. You've felt it yourself. Why do certain events feel staged, certain speeches hollow, certain leaders interchangeable? Why do slogans appear everywhere overnight, as if a single mind decided what you'd see? This is the Greymark legacy at work. A dynasty that learned to make obedience invisible, to make you think you're choosing while your choices are being arranged. And here's the darkest part. You have already been through their rituals. You think you've avoided them because you've never been to their island or their academies. But every oath you recite, every slogan you repeat, every trend you obey is part of a public observance, a mass initiation designed to prepare you for the next stage of their plan. You are not outside of it. You are inside, and only knowledge can pull you out. In a moment, we're going to go deeper into the coded rituals hidden in plain sight, the very ones shaping your daily behavior right now. If you're still with me, you're already stepping outside their script. Until now, you've seen only the architecture. Now we start to see the bricks. These are the triggers you've lived with your entire life. Patterns you thought were coincidences, but which were engineered to bypass your conscious mind. When you recognize them, something inside you shifts. It's like seeing the strings above a puppet for the first time. Take the so-called charity crests embedded in old buildings. Look at the top corners of courthouses built before 1900, the twin columns, the compass over the laurel, the phoenix emerging from a split crown. These weren't decorative flourishes. They were signatures, a way for the initiated to know a Greymark site from a distance. Inside those same buildings, the rituals of justice, education, or faith were subtly altered. Procedures reworded, prayers reversed, oaths rearranged. The outward appearance remained familiar, but the inner meaning shifted, like taking a hymn and inverting every third note so its effect becomes hypnotic rather than uplifting. Or consider the phrases repeated in your media. Certain three-word combinations have been used for over a century, popping up in newspapers, campaign speeches, even advertising slogans. Order through unity, faith over fear, truth in silence. These are not random. They're linguistic anchors, words designed to trigger the same submissive state as the original observances, but now at scale. Every time you read or repeat them, you reenact a ritual you never consented to. It's the invisible liturgy of the dynasty. Even public holidays carry hidden programming. Look closer at the dates. Look at what they commemorate versus what actually happened in history. These days are not just memorials. They are recalibrations, moments where your emotional state is collectively redirected. When millions of people perform the same gestures, sing the same songs, or stand for the same minutes of silence, the Greymark code runs again, reinforcing the mental architecture they've built for centuries. This is why you sometimes feel like something is off, why you get that electric unease at official ceremonies or in front of certain symbols. Your subconscious recognizes the pattern even if your conscious mind cannot name it. Until now, stay with me. The next section will reveal how they harvest identity itself. How each repeated ritual doesn't just control you temporarily, but slowly reshapes who you believe you are. Control over behavior is surface level. The Greymark's real aim has always been deeper, identity harvesting. They learned long ago that if you can subtly guide a man's rituals, language, and symbols, you can also re-script his sense of self. The moment you no longer know where your habits end and your identity begins, you're theirs. You are a walking continuation of a program that began centuries before you were born. Think about how you introduce yourself, the flags you salute, the names you give your children. Most of those choices feel like yours. But were they? Or were they placed inside you, generation after generation, by invisible architects who designed not just your world, but your self-concept? That's why these rituals matter. They're not just external actions, they're internal engineering. Each repeated gesture reinforces a story about who you are, what you owe, and whom you should obey. Break the gesture, and the story begins to collapse. This is why the dynasty's fingerprints appear in the foundational myths of every institution. They wrote the songs you sang as a child, designed the emblems hanging in your classrooms, even framed the moral categories you use to judge right and wrong. It's the perfect trap. You live inside a house built by someone else, thinking it's the world itself. Once that house is inside you, you guard it, you defend it, you pass it on, not realizing it's a cage built from inherited rituals. But knowledge breaks the lock. Simply recognizing the pattern weakens it. This is why you're feeling the strange mix of unease and clarity right now. Part of you is beginning to see where your identity ends and their programming begins. That's the first moment of freedom, and once you can see it, you can refuse it. You can stop repeating the phrases, stop adopting the symbols, stop performing their observances unconsciously. You can build yourself instead of being built. Here's your first step. Halfway through this journey, I want you to seal this awareness inside yourself. Comment the phrase, "I break the pattern," twice below. Do it as a ritual of your own, once in your mind, once on the screen. This is how you lock in your new identity and send a signal to yourself and to the algorithm that you are awake, because the next revelation will hit harder. In the next section, we'll expose how the Greymarks embedded their bloodline, not just in institutions but in the very crises that shape our world today. Every great crisis you've lived through, every war, every market crash, every act of God that reshaped a generation has two stories. The first is the official one you're told. The second is the one written in the margins, the one only visible to those who know where to look. The Greymarks live in the margins. They don't simply wait for disasters. They create them. And every catastrophe is not just a tragedy but an initiation ritual, a mass observance scaled up to the level of nations. Look at the patterns. The cholera epidemics of the 19th century were not just health disasters. They conveniently cleared entire districts for new model cities funded by Greymark-controlled banks. The Panic of 1873 that toppled dozens of independent banks. It also consolidated financial power into a handful of institutions whose boards were seeded with Greymark bloodline proxies. Even the great wars of the 20th century followed the pattern: a manufactured crisis, a period of disorientation, a new order rising from the rubble, with new treaties, new borders, new systems of identification, each one another step in rewriting the world's DNA. They call these events cycles. Every 30 to 40 years, a new cycle: war, pandemic, collapse, reform. You were trained to see them as separate. But if you stack them on top of each other, they form a ritual ladder. And at the top of that ladder is not chaos, but design. Each crisis strips away another layer of your inherited identity, softens your resistance, and makes you reach for the solutions they've prepared. By the time the smoke clears, you're living in a new reality that feels inevitable but was scripted years before. You may feel anger rising now. Good. Let it rise. Because once you see the pattern, you stop mistaking the cage for the world. You begin to sense how each emergency is a disguised initiation, and how you've been through more of them than you realize. This is the heartbeat of the dynasty, turning suffering into a tool for reshaping consciousness. Stay with me. The next section reveals how they decide who ascends and who is erased in these engineered upheavals and the hidden selection process that determines which men rise after the chaos and which disappear without a trace. Every engineered upheaval the Greymarks unleash is not random. Chaos, it's a sieve, a filter, a culling disguised as catastrophe. When nations burn and institutions crumble, the public thinks everyone is equally vulnerable. But behind the curtain, there is always a list. Men and families positioned in advance, quietly insured, their fortunes shifted offshore, their identities prepared for the next era. And others, competitors, outliers, freethinkers, quietly marked for ruin. This is how dynasties survive revolutions they themselves ignite. They call it the choosing. It's never spoken in public, but fragments of letters, diaries, and old academy manuals reveal the same pattern. Before each crisis, names are selected: who will be elevated, who will be exiled, who will be erased. A promising inventor may be funded and fast-tracked into elite circles, while a rival working on the same technology finds his patent stolen, his reputation destroyed. A politician may rise from obscurity overnight because he unknowingly echoes Greymark talking points, while another disappears in scandal triggered by a single leaked document. It's chess played on a living board. Even wars function this way. You think soldiers are chosen at random, but leadership, promotions, medals, those are distributed according to prearranged loyalties. Whole careers, even entire family lines, can be maneuvered like pieces. One side's collapse creates a vacuum. The dynasty fills it with their own trained initiates. Out of chaos comes order, but only for them. This is why you see the same surnames surviving every cataclysm, reappearing in new industries, new governments, new think tanks. They are not lucky. They are chosen. And as long as you remain unaware of the sieve, you're just one more piece swept away by their tide, blaming bad fortune while a hidden hand reassigns the board. You may feel an icy anger now, but also a strange clarity. This is the moment where a man stops believing in coincidence. This is where awareness becomes armor. Because once you see the choosing, you can start to step sideways to position yourself outside the funnel before the next cycle begins. In the next section, We'll go deeper into the engine of indoctrination itself, the hidden network of schools and orders still operating today that train these chosen men to act as the dynasty's living software inside our world. What began on a wind-scoured island 3 centuries ago never ended. It simply grew roots under new names. Today, the Greymark training grounds don't look like dark stone academies. They look like elite prep schools, think tanks, leadership institutes, and fellowship programs. On the surface, they offer scholarships, networking, access to power. Beneath that surface, they do what they've always done: select, condition, and deploy. Their blueprint is the same. Find young men who show hunger, intelligence, and a flicker of restlessness with the world as it is. Invite them into a program that promises to shape the leaders of tomorrow. Surround them with ritual disguised as tradition, secret handshakes, private dinners, sealed libraries. Strip away their old loyalties, one privilege at a time, and replace them with new ones. Make them believe they are part of an elite that transcends nations. Teach them codes of speech, subtle gestures, unspoken rules. By the time they graduate, they no longer think of themselves as individuals from a country. They think of themselves as agents of a lineage, and most will never even realize which lineage that is. This is how the Greymark dynasty programs living software into society. A man leaves one of these institutions and rises through a tech company, a bank, a government agency, believing he's acting on his own vision. In reality, he's carrying a payload, ideas, reflexes, priorities implanted years earlier. They don't need to send orders. The programming runs automatically. And you've seen its graduates. They're the ones who all seem to speak the same language at conferences, who pivot industries like pieces on a board, who emerge during crises already rehearsed with solutions. They are the dynasty's antibodies, injected into every organ of society to maintain the hidden order. The Greymarks understood something ancient empires never did. You don't need a king on a throne to rule the world. You just need enough of your code hidden in enough minds, and the system will run itself. Now, in the next section, we're going to peel back the final veil, the bloodline itself. How its original corruption was not only physical and genealogical, but spiritual. And how that infection spreads across generations unseen. We've spoken of rituals, institutions, and programming. But beneath it all lies the seed, the bloodline itself. Because the Greymarks were not merely ambitious aristocrats, they were corrupted from the beginning. And that corruption was not political, it was spiritual. The earliest documents we have, fragments preserved in church archives that were never meant to be public, describe the first Greymark patriarch not as a man of noble standing, but as a priest cast out for practicing rites that inverted Christian liturgy. He didn't reject faith, he perverted it. He took the symbols of light and bent them into darkness, convinced that power came not from serving God, but from mastering men by masquerading as his voice. From this inversion came the doctrine that shaped his descendants. Corruption is continuity. Each child was both heir and vessel, carrying not just a name but an infection, the belief that domination was destiny. And so the bloodline became a living conduit. Marriage was never about love, never about alliance in the ordinary sense. It was about grafting, carefully choosing mates not for beauty or wealth, but for traits that furthered the dynasty's design: memory, willpower, charisma, cruelty. Generations of deliberate breeding shaped a lineage with uncanny similarities. Same pale eyes that seemed to reflect rather than reveal. Same commanding cadence of voice. Same calculated detachment, as if the world itself was just a game of strategy. But blood is more than flesh. It carries memory. And those who married into the line often reported the same phenomenon, dreams that were not their own. Nightmares of rituals in candle-lit crypts they had never attended. Whispers in dead languages surfacing in their minds. This is why the dynasty guarded its seed so jealously. Because within it lay not just genetic traits, but the residue of generations of corruption, passed down like an invisible inheritance. You can sense it in certain families even today. That cold aura, that sense of inevitability when they enter a room, as if gravity itself bends slightly around them. You're not imagining it. You're feeling the echo of a corrupted bloodline that is carried forward for centuries without interruption. And now comes the chilling question: why preserve a bloodline so ruthlessly unless it carries something more than human? In the next section, we confront the possibility that the Greymark's continuity is not merely dynastic, but occult. By now you've sensed it. This is bigger than politics, bigger than power. The Greymark dynasty was never just about influence. It was about hosting something. For centuries, whispered accusations followed them, that their rites were not merely inverted prayers, but invitations. That the observances were not only psychological programming, but rituals designed to open a door. Survivors of early academies described the same ceremony, performed once every generation, a midnight convocation beneath a sealed chapel, the crest of the split crown above an altar, the initiates arranged in a circle of ash. Not a sacrifice, but an invocation. They called it the continuance. The idea was simple, that through discipline, secrecy, and the right blood, a lineage could become a living vessel for a force older than nations. Some called it an intelligence, some called it a god, others a parasite, but whatever it was, it gave them a terrible clarity and a patience no mortal family could maintain. This is why their symbols repeat across centuries. The twin columns, the phoenix from a split crown, not decorations but sigils. The phrases truth in silence and order through unity, not slogans but verbal seals. These are the marks of a covenant that outlived its original makers. The dynasty believes they are not simply preserving power, but continuity for an entity that moves through them like a current. And if you think this is just metaphor, look at the pattern of their births. Heirs arriving at precise astrological alignments. Their academy cycles timed to eclipses, solstices, and rare planetary convergences. Their financial moves synchronized with ritual calendars. It's the behavior of a cult, but scaled to a global operating system. This is why, when you encounter certain families, you feel something colder than ambition, something like inevitability. Because they aren't just playing a game of influence. They're fulfilling a covenant they may not even fully understand. A covenant written not in ink, but in blood. And here is the most forbidden truth. The same programming that shapes them is being tested on you. Through mass rituals disguised as trends, you are being prepared to host the same continuity, one mind at a time. In the next section, we'll unmask how this continuance infects ordinary men, how you've been groomed as an unwitting participant, and what you can do to break the link before it completes. Up to this point, it's been easy to imagine the Greymark machinery as distant, a dynasty hidden in castles, a cult whispering behind cathedral walls. But that distance is an illusion. Their final innovation was to bring the initiation to you. No invitation, no oath, no candlelit crypt. Just participation in ordinary life, engineered to mimic their observances. Think about your day. The rituals you perform without question. You rise at a time dictated by a clock someone else designed. Go to a job structured like a catechism of obedience. Submit to rules you didn't write. You speak phrases, salute symbols, click accept on terms you never read. Each of these acts is small, but together they form a lattice, a low-grade initiation that trains your nervous system to comply, to wait for permission, to forget its own power. The Greymarks understood that to control the future, you don't need to gather men in secret chambers anymore. You just need to flood their environment with ritual substitutes, mass media as catechism, consumer cycles as liturgical seasons, social platforms as confessional booths. Every time you repeat a slogan, participate in a choreographed outrage, or adopt a trend you didn't choose, you complete a micro-observance. And like drops of water on stone, these acts wear down the rock of selfhood until it becomes clay. This is how they scale the continuance. Millions of unwitting hosts, primed not by arcane chants but by repetition, distraction, and manufactured crises. You were not supposed to see this pattern, but you're seeing it now, and that alone makes you dangerous. Because awareness breaks ritual. Once you recognize the script, you can stop reading it. You can stop performing the gestures. You can begin to write your own. This is the pivot point in our descent. Halfway down the spiral, you have a choice. Sink deeper into their program, or step sideways into your own power. If you've felt that spark of recognition, anchor it now. Type the phrase, "I break the pattern," twice in the comments. Once for the man you've been, once for the man you're becoming. That small act signals to yourself, and to the algorithm that carries this message, that you're awake. Because the next section is where we rip off the final mask and see what the dynasty has planned for the coming cycle. The Dynasty has always played a long game. Each cycle, war, collapse, rebirth, has been a rehearsal for something larger. We are now living at the edge of their most ambitious script yet. For the first time, their tools are not limited to churches, banks, or governments. They have something far more powerful: instant, global infrastructure for shaping thought itself. Look at the architecture around you, the endless feeds, the predictive algorithms, the subtle pressure to brand yourself, confess your life, and trade privacy for convenience. These are not neutral platforms. They are rituals, scaled to billions. Each scroll, each click, each biometric scan adds another layer of code to your profile. A profile not built for you, but for the system. When the next crisis arrives, and it is coming, your digital self will already be positioned to accept the solution they've prepared: a universal identity. A single, seamless system where commerce, travel, health, and speech all converge under one protocol. This isn't speculation. Documents leaked from private Greymark foundations speak of total continuity. A world where the old methods of initiation are obsolete because every man carries the temple in his pocket. It's a plan to end the difference between chosen and unchosen, not by elevating everyone, but by absorbing everyone into a single managed network. Think about that. No need for hidden academies when the entire planet is the academy. No need for oaths when the device in your hand can signal compliance or dissent with perfect precision. The Dynasty has always believed that control over identity is control over reality. In their eyes, the coming cycle is not a crisis. It's a culmination. They've spent centuries shaping bloodlines, institutions, myths, and now infrastructure. The next phase is meant to lock it all into place, a final continuance where their influence becomes indistinguishable from the world itself. You may feel a tremor of fear right now. That's good, but behind it there's also a flicker of strength, because once you name the endgame, you're no longer a passive piece on their board. You become a man who can choose. In the next section, we'll reveal how this knowledge, dangerous though it is, can be turned into armor, and how to begin reclaiming the self from a system designed to dissolve it. Now you've seen the pattern. You've felt the chill of it. You've watched the pieces slide into place across centuries. This is the moment where most men either look away or surrender to despair. But despair is part of the program. It keeps you docile. It keeps you scrolling. The Greymarks don't fear your outrage. They fear your clarity. Because a man who sees the pattern and remains steady cannot be moved by it anymore. He becomes unprogrammable. The first act of reclamation is awareness. Every ritual loses power the instant it's seen for what it is. When you catch yourself repeating a slogan, stop. Ask who benefits from you saying it. When you're herded toward a crisis narrative, pause. Ask who prepared the solution you're about to accept. This sounds small, but it's the crack in the wall where light enters. The second act is ritual replacement. The Dynasty built its power by embedding rituals in your daily life. You undo it by embedding your own. Wake at a time you choose, not when you're told. Start your day with an act of silence, not a feed of noise. Create your own symbols, your own codes, your own language of power. This is not superstition. It's training. It's you reclaiming the nervous system they've conditioned. The third act is alignment. Find other men who are awake, not to form another cult, but to build parallel networks outside the system's assumptions. Speak plainly. Refuse to worship the idols of trend and spectacle. This is how you become a living firewall, a node the program cannot run on. The Greymarks have spent centuries perfecting their machine, but machines break when their parts stop cooperating. Every man who steps outside the script weakens the continuance. This is not theory. It's math. Their system only works at scale. It collapses when enough people stop performing it. Feel that steadiness inside you? That is your first taste of freedom. In the next section, we'll go deeper. Not just how to step out of their rituals, but how to build an inner fortress so strong that no crisis, no cycle, no dynasty can ever pull you back into the continuance again. This is where the real work begins. Most men stop at outrage. They collect facts, trade secrets, argue online, and call it awareness. That's not freedom. That's just another loop of the program. True immunity doesn't come from knowing about the Greymarks. It comes from rewiring yourself so deeply that their hooks no longer fit into you. The fortress you must build isn't a bunker or a bank account. It's a state of being. Imagine a citadel inside your mind. Not a fantasy, but a practice. Every morning before the noise touches you, you enter that space. You decide what you will think, what you will say, what you will do. You rehearse your values until they're reflexes. The Greymark's program reflexes. You can too. But yours are chosen, forged, deliberate. Inside that fortress, you learn to separate signals from triggers. When a headline screams, when a feed flashes, when a crisis narrative appears, you breathe once, twice. You decide, is this real? Is this mine? Or is this another hand reaching for my nervous system? That pause is power. It's the act of a sovereign man. It's the moment where programming fails, and then you sharpen. You read the old texts, not the sanitized versions, but the originals. You train your body, not for vanity, but for readiness. You keep your word. You live by a code no algorithm can rewrite. This isn't about paranoia. It's about calibration. You become a man whose inner compass points true, even when every external signal spins. When enough men do this, the Greymark dynasty's greatest weapon, the power to shape identity, dissolves. Because identity becomes self-chosen, self-forged. Their continuance requires you to be a mirror. Your fortress makes you a flame. We're almost at the end now. In the final section, I'm going to give you the last piece, the way to turn everything you've learned into a living oath, a signal to yourself and to the hidden system that you are no longer a recruit. You are no longer programmable. You are awake. You've walked through the shadow corridors of the Greymark dynasty. You've seen their origins, their rituals, their institutions, their programming. And you've begun to glimpse something more dangerous than any secret they hold, your own capacity to resist and to choose. That's the moment they never wanted you to reach. Because the Greymark machine isn't built to crush men who know themselves. It's built to guide the blind. Right now, you're standing at a crossroads between two worlds. In one, you keep scrolling, keep consuming, keep performing your assigned role in the continuance. In the other, you step across an invisible threshold and claim your life back as your own. You become a man who acts, not a man who's acted upon. Here's the ritual to make that real. Close your eyes after this video ends. Breathe 3 times. Say out loud, or in your mind if you must, a simple phrase, I break the continuance. Write it below in the comments twice. Not for me, but for you. Mark it as a signal to your own nervous system, a public witness to your private decision. It's a symbolic strike against centuries of programming. It's you choosing to be the author instead of the script. The Greymark dynasty built its empire on secrecy, on grooming, on hidden power passed hand to hand. But power can change hands in an instant when a man stops consenting. Their rituals only bind the unknowing. Awareness is the solvent. Action is the blade. If you've made it this far, you're no longer a spectator. You're a participant in the breaking of a cycle older than your great-grandfather's birth. This isn't just a story you've heard. It's a seed planted inside you. It will grow if you let it. Nurture it with discipline, with silence, with truth, and with brotherhood among those who refuse to be programmed. And remember this as you leave. They can own the myths. They can own the institutions. They can even own the bloodlines, but they cannot own a man who builds his own fortress, who rewrites his own code, who looks into the forbidden and does not flinch. That man is dangerous. That man is free. Now step forward. Comment, I break the continuance twice. Draw the line. Claim your mind. And never forget what you've learned here.